Welcome once again, my brothers and sisters, to another Living Hope Today study. So thankful to God that you are here. And today we find ourselves in 1 Kings chapter 10. You remember back in chapter 3 when God came to Solomon and said, "What do you want? Tell me what you want." And Solomon says to God, "You know what I really want is discernment and wisdom in order that I can lead your people. I don't know what I'm doing. Please, all I want is your power to lead your people." God is so impressed with the unselfish reply that Solomon gives that he says, "I'm not only going to give you wisdom and discretion, I'm going to show you how to deal with all these situations," but he says, "I'm going to give you riches and honor too." And as the story of Solomon plays out, we've watched him build the temple, we've watched him build the palace, and now we're at a place where the Bible just takes us into the fulfillment of the promises that God has made to Solomon to show the faithfulness of God, to show the unusual power and riches and honor that Solomon has. Look at this. When the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon and his relation to the name of the Lord. So where's Sheba? Well, I'll show you in a map as we get there. But here she is. She hears about Solomon. In other words, his fame is spreading throughout. All right? She's heard about him, but she's also heard about his relationship to the Lord. So she knows something is unique about Solomon. He is following the God that's real. Well, she has to come investigate. All right? She came to test him with hard questions. Well, what happens? Arriving at Jerusalem with a very great caravan with camels carrying spices, large quantities of gold and precious stones, she came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. So she's asking him hard questions. She's trying to test him. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. When the Queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon and the palace he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials, the attending servants in their robes, his cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he made at the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed. He's greatly supplied. He has great organization. Everybody's working to do the job that he's assigned. He has a wonderful, wonderful monarchy. And she says to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true, but I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me. In wisdom and wealth, you have far exceeded the report I heard." Now, what is her testimony doing? It's validating the promise that God has made to Solomon. Through this episode of the Queen of Sheba's visit and the description of all the things that Solomon has and how he's structured his court and how everything's working, we are basically learning what the power of God is doing in his life based on the promises he's already made to Solomon. All right, so she says, "Look, things are way better than I heard, and I heard that they were great. How happy your men must be, how happy your officials who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Praise be to the Lord your God." What? The Queen of Sheba is now praising God through the testimony of Solomon's life. That testimony is God has promised all these things to Solomon, and the Queen of Sheba sees that God has delivered on every promise. She's never seen anything like this. Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king to maintain justice and righteousness. Beautiful. Beautiful. That's a great understanding of the power of the king. Maintain justice, maintain righteousness. And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spices and precious stones. Never again were so many spices brought in as those the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Okay, now we kind of get to a footnote. Hiram's ships brought gold from Ophir, and from there they brought great cargoes of almug wood and precious stones. Again, Solomon's always been on this receiving line of materials that he might need to construct the things he's building. The king used the almug wood to make supports for the temple of the Lord and for the royal palace, and to make harps and lyres for the musicians. So much almug wood has never been imported or seen since that day. So we're just told the blessings that God is providing. King Solomon gave the queen of Sheba all she desired and asked for, besides what he had given her out of his royal bounty. Then she left and returned with her retinue to her own country. The weight of the gold that Solomon received yearly was 666 talents, not including the revenues from merchants and traders and from all the Arabian kings and the governors of the land. In other words, Solomon's wealth is increasing exponentially. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. If you're going to make 200 shields out of gold, you know what that means? You got a lot of gold. That's what it means. 600 bekas of gold went into each shield. He also made 300 small shields of hammered gold with 3 minas of gold in each shield. The king put them in the palace of the forest of Lebanon. Then the king made a great throne inlaid with ivory and overlaid with fine gold. Notice, now the wealth is starting to become ornamentation for Solomon. Okay, we don't think yet that all this has really gone to his head, but we want to just recognize that he continually now starts building up things that honor him. All right, the king made a great throne inlaid with ivory and overlaid with fine gold. The throne had 6 steps, and its back had a rounded top, and on both sides of the seat were armrests with a lion standing beside each of them. He's looking more regal all the time. 12 lions stood on the 6 steps, one at either end of each step. Nothing like it had ever been made for any other kingdom. All King Solomon's goblets were gold, and all the household articles in the palace of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's day. So Solomon continues to build himself up. The king had a fleet of trading ships at sea along with the ships of Hiram. Once every 3 years it returned carrying gold, silver, and ivory, and apes and baboons. So now Solomon is broadening his horizons into acquiring wild animals. Well, here's the verse. The King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. What is that? That's the fulfillment that God has kept his promise to Solomon, that Solomon's wisdom has resulted in great decisions, and God's anointing has resulted in true wisdom, wealth, and honor. The whole world is looking to him because he's better than them all and has more than all of them. Well, the whole world sought audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom God had put in his heart. Year after year, everyone who came brought a gift. Articles of silver and gold, robes, weapons, and spices, horses and mules. Solomon's wealth continues to grow. Solomon accumulated chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses, which he kept in the chariot cities and also with him in Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar was plentiful as sycamore fig trees in the foothills. In other words, there's opulence. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and Kuwait. The royal merchants purchased them from Kuwait. They imported a chariot from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver and a horse for 150. They also exported them to all the kings of the Hittites and of the Arameans. So we see by the end of chapter 10 that Solomon's wealth has expanded hugely. He has more than anybody's ever had. In fact, he's now exporting his chariots and weaponry to other kingdoms. He's receiving gifts repeatedly from the kings of the area and the Queen of Sheba as well, as we saw. All this to tell us one thing. God has his hand on Solomon. But do you remember when God did promise Solomon these things, there was a condition. There was a big if. Do you remember the if? If you continue to keep my commands. God's telling him, if you follow me, if you're obedient, then I will not only continue to bless you, but I will make sure there's somebody on this throne forever. Well, we're going to see as we move forward from here that Solomon somehow lets all this go to his head. And as he begins to think more and more of himself, he begins to think less and less of obeying God. And as that process takes its course, Solomon ends up making some really bad decisions. And we'll see that as we move forward. Church, obey the Lord. He knows how to bless all of us. God bless you. Serve him well today.
Who is it who for sinners shed his blood, and now for cleansing all can plunge beneath that flood? It's Jesus. But do you know who he is? He's the image of the invisible God, and he's the brightness of his glory, the first, the last, the future, the past. He is God.